Thank you for joining us today for the Conform to Christ podcast, where we seek to engage the mind, affect the heart, and call people to follow Christ. Jay Jones, and I'm here with George Mays, and it is Free for All Friday. Well, we're starting a new series. I guess it's still Free for All Friday, but kind of similar to the other series we've done. This one what do we say we're going to do? Maybe do 5 for sure, probably. And then we'll see how many more, but it's on most misused Bible verses or most abused Bible verses. So that's what we're doing, and we're going to kick it off with everybody's favorite verse in the entire world. Judge not that you be not judged. Matthew 7:1.
I feel like we need to start with something from the Old Testament about immigrants.
Okay.
Have you been following? You've been following the Texas situation, haven't you?
Yeah.
Any thoughts? There's a bunch of governors that are showing support for Governor Abbott.
Yeah.
And there's a trucker convoy heading down there.
I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, there's a trucker convoy that's heading down there also.
Yeah.
Like they did in Canada several years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a trucker convoy going down.
Well, it seems, I think rather obvious when how the numbers have just spiked. Like it's astronomical how much it's gone up. And so the federal government's just failed to do its job. Just think back to 9/11, okay?
Mm-hmm.
This would never happen after that because people were hyper aware of the danger, like knowing that there are a lot of people coming because they're seeking a better life for their families, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's just easily capitalized upon by people who have, want to kill us. They can just easily get in through that. And in fact, I think there were many back then plots foiled with just that plan. But today, in the state of the world, in the Middle East, it just seems absolutely reckless to just keep it open like that.
Right.
So,
I look at Dusty's Twitter feed every once in a while. New senator in Oklahoma, and he tweeted about it, standing with Governor Abbott, and the comments, which reinforce why I would never go into politics, ranged everywhere from where's that in the Bible to actually quoting stuff from Leviticus to we're not a theocracy.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was funny seeing both of those comments. Which one is it? Is it we need to follow what the Old Testament says about aliens living among us, or are we not a theocracy?
Right.
Which one is it?
Yeah, which one do we pick?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We might want to engage with that those passages sometime.
Yeah, sometime in the future coming up.
Talk about what that means.
It's interesting to me that no one really applies the same standards to other countries. Why don't you just try to go to China? You just apply the same standard you have for America, and just try to get you a collection of about 500 people, hop on a boat, and then try to go enter China.
Yeah, no.
No nation. You even take European nations.
Mm-hmm.
You're not getting in.
Yeah, I don't hear anyone complaining about passports.
Right.
You can't get into another country without a passport.
Right.
But you can get into Texas.
Yeah. And it's more than that, too, when it comes to the Texas situation. I've talked to you about, I've got all kinds of ideas about things we could do, because there are a lot of people that are good.
I'm sure you do.
They want a better life, so I can imagine if I had no way to take care of my kids, I'm going to do whatever I got to do to take care of them,
Right.
If that means I got to cross illegally so they don't starve to death and I send money back to them, that's what it means. And there are a lot of people like that. They're doing that. So, we had an Ellis Island period where pretty much anybody could come here,
Mm.
be documented, and begin working. And I think we probably need something like that. It's pretty obvious the birth rate in America is unsustainable
Mm-hmm.
because Americans hate children, and we've just decided to destroy our civilization because we hate children. And so people coming into our country isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Mm.
It could be a very good thing. So all of our, relatives came here that some way
Yeah.
legally.
Yeah.
So there's got to be some way to do that. And there are a lot of really good hardworking people, but there's a really bad dark side of human trafficking, and some really wicked and evil things going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so having it just kind of as it is right now empowers that type of evil.
Yeah.
Right. So you need to shut it down somehow first. Then I think open up like a LSI, like maybe we need a new Statue of Liberty in Texas where people can just come and legally, like the people that want to be here as good citizens. And we have enough land. We can be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Fentanyl. I mean,
Yeah.
so from Abbott's perspective, he I think rightly sees this as an invasion.
Right.
And again, don't twist his words because he knows there are good people among them, but there are a lot of bad people.
Right.
And the drugs and the number of Americans dying.
Yeah. And they
From
haven't.
drug
They
overdoses.
haven't. They're not. He's not talking about the legal ways,
Right.
the legal entry points into Texas.
Right.
He's talking about these people that are swimming across the river
Uh-huh.
and trying to climb over razor wire.
Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, he has an obligation to protect the citizens of Texas from a drug invasion. I mean, it's a drug invasion going on.
Yeah.
So this isn't as if you're against illegal immigration, that doesn't make you a racist, because you could be against illegal immigration and for legal immigration, even for expanding legal immigration, so
Yeah.
people can come here and pursue their dreams. But that's not the way it's always presented politically. They're
Right.
like, you're against the alien and foreigner,
Mm-hmm.
though they would never use the term alien. You're you know what I mean? You're against the foreigner and you're against the Bible.
The aliens are already here, Jay.
Yeah, the aliens are here. They don't care about razor wire. They just phase
Phase
out.
right through
They
'em.
phase right through that razor wire.
Jay, are we going to talk about what happened this morning?
You can if you want, George. Tell us about what happened. You pulled up. It was it's a pretty nice day. You pull up in your car.
Yeah, the sun's out.
Yeah.
That's something we haven't seen in a few days.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's in a good mood. Came in,
Yeah.
was whistling a little tune.
I heard you whistling. when
Yeah,
came
you heard
in.
me. I'm sure you did.
Mhm.
So I walked past. Anyone that goes to church should know. You walk past Jay's office. He wasn't there. Lights on. Probably talking to Philip or Larry. I go into I have a little hallway.
Mhm.
I went into it.
It's a little book nook.
Yeah. And start turning on my lights in my office. Having a good time. I come around my desk, and there's Jay jumps out from underneath my desk. Ah!
You let out a little. I want to call it. It wasn't a scream. It was like a little man yell. Let out a little yell. And I think you might have caught like an inch of air. I think you jumped a little bit.
I said, "You're under the desk." I don't know how. I don't think I could physically get under a desk. I don't know how you fit under there. Did you hear? Did you hear the doorbell go off and like scramble into my office? What'd you do?
I was up and I saw your car come by.
Okay.
And so I ran in. I told Philip. I ran into Philip's office. I said, "I'm going to scare George." I was hoping he would record it, but he didn't. He didn't record it. It could have been good podcast material had he recorded it.
Parker scared me on Monday. What's going on?
Did he really?
He's hiding behind my door.
Trying to help you work on your situational awareness.
I guess. Trying to give me
It's
a
good.
heart attack.
It's a positive work environment in here.
Something.
Yeah.
I think I'm okay now.
Good.
I think I'm all right.
You're hyped for the podcast.
Mhm. Yeah.
Ah, good times.
Came across this story several weeks ago. Kept wanting to bring it out, but just didn't have an opportunity. I thought it's funny, but it's sad at the same time. This is a story from the New York Post from December 15th. You can throw it up on the screen if you want to. You can see the headline. Gen Z suffers from menu anxiety when dining out, with many too scared to order their own meals.
What? There's no way. There's no way. What? Menu anxiety. Like there's too much. Like there's too much to read. They're overwhelmed by the amount.
Researchers asked more than 2,000 people how relaxed they felt while eating out, hoping to gauge how enjoyable the experience is for everyone. About 86% of Gen Z adults aged 18 to 24 in the study admitted they have suffered from menu anxiety when dining in restaurants. Some of these young adults, 34%, reported feeling so anxious they wind up asking other people at the table to speak to waiters on their behalf.
Bro. Got a lot of very anxious people in the world.
Now I have my own theory as to why this would be the case. And I think it's because we are not used to talking to people in person anymore.
Well, okay.
People are so glued to their phones that they can't talk to somebody.
That here comes a
like
stranger.
A stranger. Yeah. That's my theory.
Yeah. Well, I kind of take my philosophy is when people have anxiety about something, it's desensitizing them to it by exposure.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of my philosophy. I think it works. I think it's proven to work that if something causes you anxiety, rather than avoid it, you should expose yourself to it repeatedly until you become desensitized to it.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm just here for the what's that? Oh yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Good to see you, friend. Here comes there was a Parker Green made an appearance.
Little cameo.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
We got another cameo.
There's
You
another.
got there. You
There's
got
another cameo.
fix that. Yeah, we've been trying to get that fixed for a while.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Little
Philip with an appearance. Just need Dave. Where's Dave?
It's like a circus up here today.
Yeah. No, that works. Desensitizing you to your fears and what caused you anxiety, it works, man. Like I learned this in the Army. Like when you go through basic training, you'll be exposed to everything that could possibly cause a human fear. Everything. So if you have fear of heights, they make you climb this crazy weird tower.
Yeah.
And like it's not like you have a safety thing on you. Like if you fall off the tower, you're gonna get hurt. But you have to climb it, or they'll you have to crawl through like a water, like a drainage. Think it's like a drainage ditch, one of those round ones that go under roads. Be filled with water. Like you can still breathe, but you got to climb through it. So you're just, if you have claustrophobia, like you're gonna have a freak out. And they make you do that stuff, and so you have to do all this stuff like over and over. Then eventually, like if you have any type of fear whatsoever, you're gonna be like, yeah. But I know that I can do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It works, man. You have social anxiety. Expose yourself to other people enough, and eventually you'll adjust. Like human beings are incredibly adaptable. You know? So if you've got some anxiety about ordering, here's my recommendation, okay? You go to Panchitos here in Lawton. Right, and you open the menu, and there'll be so many things on there. You could eat there every day.
It is funny that you mentioned that specific restaurant because just last week, Julia was mentioning that she hadn't heard you mention that.
Well, I'm mentioning it. I'm trying to get these guys help. I mean, they don't really do marketing. It's a shame there
Yeah.
aren't more people eating in there because they've got all kinds of things
Mhm.
that like. But also, George, an added bonus is when you go there, the person taking your order, there's a good chance they probably don't speak English.
Mhm.
So you're going to be exposed to a menu that has all kinds of things,
Yeah.
more than you can look at. And then you're going to have to figure out how to communicate.
Mhm.
And I usually go with the point method. That's mine. I just open the menu and I just go, that right there. And do that enough, and you'll be over your menu anxiety. Yeah.
Come on, Gen Zers, you can order off the menu.
You can do it.
Is.
And as an added bonus at Panchitos, you can pay by scanning a QR code and paying on your phone. There you go. So there's one less thing for you to worry about. Don't have to pay a waiter, or pay at the as you leave. That's an option at a lot of places. Pay as you leave. Yeah.
Or just dine and dash.
George,
I mean-
George, I am wondering, what kind of anxieties do you have?
How long we got?
You do have a strange one, though. You have a telephone anxiety, it
I
seems.
do.
You don't like
Yep.
to talk on the telephone.
I do not like talking on the telephone. I don't know where that came from because that hasn't always been the case. I used to talk on the phone all the time.
Think back to your childhood. Was there a time when you got wrapped up in the phone cord and couldn't get out?
No.
That caused
Though we
this?
did. Did you have
People
the?
don't know what that means. Like,
Did you have the phone cord that
Oh,
was
yeah.
stretched like
Yeah,
halfway across
yeah.
the house?
you got to have it.
You gotta have it.
Got to have
Yep.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now people don't even. Our kids don't even know what that. We don't even have.
We
a
went
home,
through-
We don't even have a home phone. You have a home phone,
No. we don't,
Larry?
which
Do you have a
sucks.
home phone?
Nobody
Yep,
has. Nobody's got a home
No
phone.
one's got a home phone.
We don't even have a church phone. How's that for it?
No, we do
We have
not.
cell phones only.
No.
Contact info on the back of the bulletin.
hmm
Um,
I don't know. I used to talk on the phone all the time. I mean, yeah, I don't know why I stopped talking on the phone, but yeah, I don't like it.
yeah.
I'd rather talk face to face with someone than talk on the phone.
Interesting.
You've got a strange one. You don't like sharks.
Yeah.
You
But
live in Oklahoma, and
Mm-hmm. I'm starting to think, though, however, because I can get in the water and like swim around. If you can see like really good, doesn't bother me.
well,
But I think it's really, I can't remember, there's a term for it. It's like a fear of the deep. I think that's what it is. I think it's more
I think that's a rational fear.
being, because it's like you're in the ocean, if you're in the ocean
Yeah.
and you don't know what's under you.
hmm
So that really, like if I was on the ocean and it cracked, like it
Mhm.
sank and we're just floating out there in the ocean,
Yeah.
like I'm going to probably have a heart attack.
Mm.
Yeah. Even if I have a life raft. Yeah. That right there.
I think talking on the phone is maybe my biggest fear.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
I know.
Wow. Yeah, that is interesting.
I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Huh. I don't know what to tell you. I guess we just need to have daily conversations to desensitize you.
Please don't.
I'll try to call you once a day. All right. Trying to look out for you.
When I don't answer, just know I've got caller ID. So
Oh man.
yeah, and if your name doesn't pop up on my phone, I probably won't answer.
Yeah. This one will be a surprise to probably a lot of people, but I have major anxiety for public speaking. Big time.
Mm.
Big time. Now, when I get up to preach, it's different because I have time to like prepare, like through worship and then prayer beforehand, but I'm getting myself ready, like, and then I kind of just, as I stand up to go, kind of blank out. I go into a zone. But like if I get asked to speak to
Are
an
you telling us you're in a trance when you're preaching, Jay?
it's similar to a trance. Yeah. Some would say it's getting in the zone.
Could we throw stuff at you and you wouldn't even notice?
No, I would notice. I would
okay.
notice. Like I thought some people left during the last sermon,
Mhm.
but they actually didn't. I think they went to maybe the bathroom and came back, but I thought they got mad about something I said and they left. 'Cause that's happened before, but I noticed that. But if I get asked to come speak at like a FCA or something like that,
Yeah.
and there's going to be like 7 people there,
Mhm.
I'll worry about it all week.
Really?
and then I'll be super anxious.
Hmm.
I'll get up and stand before like 7 kids, and I'm like, oh. It's like even worse than, like way worse than getting up to preach in front of the church,
Hmm.
or even doing like baptisms.
Yeah.
Sitting back there waiting, like, all right, now I got to get up. I got to talk in front of all these people. Like,
The wait is the worst.
they're all looking up here.
There's no comfortable place to sit while you're up there waiting.
So I'm, the desensitizing program, it's going pretty well because I have to preach a lot.
I used to. I used to really have a fear of getting up in front of people, but it doesn't bother me very much anymore.
That's good.
Yeah, I can. Like at our homeschool program, they'll often ask me to come up and say something, and it doesn't really bother me.
They always say like, oh, if you're not called to be a preacher if you could see yourself doing anything else. And I'm like, I could see myself doing other stuff all the time, man. Like I wouldn't have picked this for myself. Like if God gives a job applications, public speaking every week, I'm going to go, I don't think so. Right. But, the calling overrides your anxieties. So, and like I said, when I get up to preach, I feel like God equips me for that moment to preach. But it's just like the other stuff. I'm not going to be a volunteer. Like, who wants to come talk to these kids? I'm gonna be like, like it's irrational, right? It's completely irrational. Almost as irrational as ordering from a waiter. But there you go. Look, people are learning things about us. They probably want us to talk about this.
They probably do. They're like, I tuned in for this.
What else we got though? We got this one. Obviously, we start with judging. Like,
why are we doing this?
Well, because
I'm asking you a serious question, Jay.
Serious question.
Why are we doing this?
Well, number one.
Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this series?
Well, we needed something to do.
All right.
There's the first one.
Okay, that's a fair answer.
And I think doing series are kind of fun too.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are a lot of Bible verses that are just completely taken out of their context and used and abused, and people just don't really know. It's pretty obvious. Even sometimes preachers will use some of the ones we're gonna talk about. I think you'll see as we get to those will be used that just completely wrong. But the most popular one today is "Judge not." Lest you be judged.
Everyone knows it.
Everyone knows that verse. Yeah. It's kind of overtaken John 3:16. There was a time where John 3:16 was probably the Bible verse that most people kind of knew. I think this is it today.
Oh yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah. So Matthew,
without a doubt,
Matthew 7. That's where we're going to begin, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, man, I wish we had like some type of good video, but I think everybody has encountered "Judge not." Have you ever seen? It's a pretty popular tattoo these days. "Only God can judge me."
Yeah.
You ever seen that?
Mm-hmm.
Or people will meme it. "Only God can judge me." I don't know this for a fact, but I think Tupac made that popular.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because he had an I can't remember the name of the album. I'm not brushed up on my gangster rap like I should be. But there was a song that was called that. "Only God can judge me," and I think that's what really popularized that statement in the culture today. "Only God can judge me," like that's a good thing. That's what's funny about it. You can't.
It
judge
is
me.
Yes, it is a Tupac song.
"Only God can judge me."
Yep.
Yeah, and so I think the meme is like, "Only God can judge me," and it's like, yeah, that's worse, right? Yeah, that's worse. That's not a good thing. So yeah, but we've seen that. That's used usually anytime anyone would try to point anything out. People will who really, a lot of them aren't even Christians. They're quick to go there. That's their rebuttal always. So yeah, so we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah. So thoughts. Have you encountered this before?
I don't know if it's ever been quoted at me, but certainly the idea
Mm-hmm.
of don't judge, don't be judgmental.
Right.
Like that's it's kind of morphed into stop being so judgmental.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We talked about this. We talked about this with the Alistair Begg clip on Tuesday.
Mm.
He said that the grandmother should go,
Uh-huh.
and she could surprise him with her love. But if she doesn't go, then she'll just reinforce the idea that Christians are judgmental.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's the phraseology, I guess, has kind of morphed into this
Mhm.
stop being so judgmental,
Right.
like an attitude of judging,
Uh-huh.
right?
Right. Yeah.
But I don't think I don't think anyone's actually like quoted this passage at me.
Yeah. But it does bring up a curious question. If people are always saying that Christians are judgmental, are they not judging themselves
Right.
by some standard? There's
Mhm.
some standard out there apparently that people are saying Christians are judgmental by. What is that standard?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's the same idea as like Christians are just indoctrinating their children.
Mm-hmm.
So send them to public schools so someone else can indoctrinate them instead.
Mm-hmm.
It's like indoctrination happens. You can't avoid it.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you can avoid it if you just are a completely hands-off parent.
Yeah. You're still going to. Indoctrination is a strong word. I mean, you're going to teach. You're going to teach and pass things on to your children.
Which
no matter
that
what.
is what indoctrination means. Doctrine is just teaching.
Teaching.
In is in,
Yeah.
so it's just in teaching. You're
Mhm.
you're just passing teaching along to
Mhm.
someone else,
Right.
and hoping that they take it in and,
Uh-huh.
and that they live that way also.
Yeah.
Everyone's doing that.
Right.
Really, the question is who is doing the indoctrination.
Uh-huh.
It's the same with judging. Don't judge. And whenever it's used as kind of this attack phrase against Christians, it's by people who are judging Christians. Like, you're judging me for being wrong. You're wrong.
Yeah. 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 So the people pretty much only know the verse, judge not that you may not be judged. And they just kind of stop there. But it'd be very helpful if they just kept going. So maybe just read. Should we read it? Want to read it for us?
Well, let's set the context. I mean, this is not a passage that's just floating out there in a vacuum.
Yeah.
It's in the Sermon on the Mount.
Uh-huh.
So it's within one block of teaching
Uh-huh.
found in Matthew chapter 5 through 7.
Right.
And there's a clear structure to how Jesus is presenting this.
Mm-hmm.
So you start with the Beatitudes. What are the characteristics of a disciple?
Mm-hmm.
And it moves into really a contrast between the Pharisees and their supposed righteousness,
Mm-hmm.
and what does it look like to actually follow the teachings of the Scriptures.
Right. Because they have their own standard.
Right.
Man-made
And they would
standards.
take the Scriptures. So you get places like Jesus is saying, you have heard it said, do not murder.
Uh-huh.
But I say to you, anyone who is angry with his brother without cause is guilty. And so and he'd say it with adultery and swearing an oath, and he just goes through several things: retaliation, loving your enemies. So the Pharisees, they take these teachings and they would say, well, I haven't actually committed adultery.
Yeah.
And so I'm following the letter of the law.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus says, but I say to you, anyone that looks with lustful intent at a woman has committed adultery with her in your heart.
Yeah.
And so he's unpacking the true teaching of the law.
Yeah.
And he's saying, no, it's not just what you're doing, it's what's going on in your heart that
Mhm.
leads you to do
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah.
So it's not just the finished product of murder.
Mhm.
It's where does murder start? It starts in your heart
Mhm.
with anger and hatred. And so he is he's not really introducing new things so much as he's getting to what the law was about in the first place. What the law was
Right.
what the law was meant to expose was the problem of the heart.
Yeah.
And then it moves into practicing your righteousness, prayer and fasting and giving, and then we get kind of this transition coming off of this into false teachers, like
Yeah.
identifying those who are believers or who are disciples and those who aren't. And so it's there in the middle of this sermon that he says this, and
Right.
that's it's still exposing the false teaching of the Pharisees in contrast with what does a disciple look like.
Mhm.
And so we have to understand that when we come to this, and then we have to read more than just one verse.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Very true.
You want me to read it?
Yes,
You
I
gonna
do.
read it?
You can read it.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we want to read 6 verses,
Mhm.
not just one. Judge not, that you be not judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Do not give dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls before pigs, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you.
Yeah.
And there's the
There it is.
whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So the verse really isn't about not judging others. It's about, just to summarize it, it's about judging people with the right judgment and not being a hypocrite. So if you, let's take a scenario. You see some guy who is, maybe they're not being a good husband toward their wife, right? You observe that, and then you approach them, confront them about that. Meanwhile, you at home are an absolute jerk to your wife. That would be a perfect illustration of what he is speaking about, right?
Yes.
So how can you apply, and the standard of what we say when we say judge with right judgment is not man's standard like the Pharisees had. They had all these standards that were outside of God's law, like an extra fence, a perimeter fence. And they were judging everybody according to these things. But the standard by which we are to judge is God's word and his law. But how can you do that if you are engaged in the very same thing to which you are trying to correct somebody on?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's it in the broadest sense.
Yeah.
Right there.
We know that it's not do not judge at all. We know
Yeah.
that that's the wrong interpretation, because Jesus would be saying a self-contradictory statement here
Right.
if that's what he meant.
Uh-huh.
Because by saying do not judge and then calling them hypocrites, he's judging.
Yes.
He's casting a judgment
Right.
on their actions.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what it is. We can go over. There's some other passages
Oh,
that
yeah.
we can look at.
There's
that
a lot.
that will help to.
We can jump over
to
to Luke.
understand
I think
this.
Luke chapter 6.
Mm-hmm.
It's very similar. But even if you just keep reading down,
Mm-hmm.
he tells, so this is for his disciples,
Mm-hmm.
to beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree that bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will recognize them by their fruits. So if we're not to judge at all, then we have no way of judging. Like, we can't discern people's fruit, and we can't tell who are false teachers coming into the church.
Right.
We can't even discern like who are appropriate church leaders. There's no way to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
If the standard is do not judge, then we can't even examine fruit, which is what
it's just a free for all. It's just anarchy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Why would we even spend time teaching?
Right.
Why would we even spend time with this book if that's what it meant? It's just a free for all. Don't judge. It doesn't make any sense. It's irrational. It's a completely illogical belief.
Right. Yeah. And another way it's kind of leveraged in our culture is this: you can't judge me because you don't know my life. Like, you don't know what I've been through in my life.
Right.
So now how can you judge me here now?
Right.
So I think the important thing in that situation is to say, I'm not judging you because I don't have a standard. That's my own standard.
Mm-hmm.
God is ultimately the judge. He's got a standard.
Right.
And so that standard is the baseline
Mm-hmm.
from which any judgment is made.
Right.
So, yes, only God can judge you. And here's how he does.
Yeah.
Right. This is what he says. This is what his word says.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then to not be a hypocrite, to not be a person that someone could say, well, look at you. Like, how are you going to call me out on this? And you don't even live like a disciple.
Right.
So,
yeah. And that's what he says in verse 3 and 4. He says, why do you see the speck that's in your brother's eye, but you do not notice? The word is consider. You don't even give a thought to the log that's in your own eye. So you're going around trying to get, you're nitpicking out of what everyone else is doing, and you aren't even stopping to consider your own life and what's completely blinding you to your own sin.
right. Yeah.
And so he says, first, you need to take the log out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye.
Right.
And the imagery there, the way that he's communicating this is so, it's comical when you think of somebody that has maybe a tiny speck in their eye, which is a problem. If you've ever had anything in your eye, it doesn't have to be big to cause a lot of problems.
Yeah.
But you've got this other person that's trying to get the speck out of this other person's eye, and they've got this gigantic beam
Right.
that's hanging out of their own eye. They can't see what they're doing. How can they expect to get the speck out of their brother's eye when they haven't even looked in the mirror to see, I've got something more than just a little speck in my eye.
Right.
I'm completely blinded.
But
this is common for
Mhm.
people. It's really easy to see other people's faults,
Right.
and ignore our own.
Mhm.
Some of the things that we probably, I think if I'm being honest, a lot of the things that bother me the most about what my kids do are probably things that they picked up from me. So the things that annoy me the most are probably things that I do. And so first I need to examine what's going on with me, but that doesn't mean that I just say, well, I understand where you're coming from.
Right.
So just you do you.
Uh-huh.
Like, who am I to say?
Uh-huh.
He says, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you can see clearly to get the speck out of your brother's eye.
Yeah.
So it's not a just live and let live. It's not a I'll excuse it because I've got my own problems.
Yeah.
It's I'll repent first,
Yeah.
and then I'll help you
Mm-hmm.
to repent.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And we see this in other places. And he says to the Jews in John chapter 7, there's questions about who Jesus is,
Mm-hmm.
and John chapter 7, I guess beginning in verse 14, it says about the middle of the feast, Jesus went up into the temple and began teaching. The Jews therefore marveled, saying, "How is it that this man has learning when he has never studied?" So Jesus answered them, "My teaching is not mine, but his who sent me. If anyone's will is to do God's will, he will know whether the teaching is from God or whether I'm speaking on my own authority. The one who speaks on his own authority seeks his own glory, but the one who seeks the glory of him who sent him is true, and in him there is no falsehood. Has not Moses given you the law? Yet none of you keeps the law. Why do you seek to kill me?" The crowd answered, "You have a demon. Who is seeking to kill you?" Jesus answered them, "I did one work, and you all marvel at it. Moses gave you circumcision, not that it is from Moses, but from the fathers, and you circumcise a man on the Sabbath. If on the Sabbath a man receives circumcision, so that the law of Moses may not be broken, are you angry with me because on the Sabbath I made a man's whole body well? Do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment."
Yeah.
So he's calling them back to the scriptures. Examine what did Moses say,
Right.
and then judge what I'm doing
Yeah.
based on the scriptures.
Yeah.
Don't judge just by what you are observing, not just what the things that you are thinking is right in your
Right.
in your own mind,
Yeah.
but judge with right judgment.
Yes. Yeah. That and judging by that standard. So there is a standard by which humans
Right.
are judged.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a man-made standard.
Right.
He'll do something similar, when they're angry. They always get angry when he heals somebody on the Sabbath, and he brings up the law, like if an animal falls into a pit on the Sabbath day, you don't just let your animal die.
Right.
You got to get your animal out and care for it.
Mm-hmm.
How much more then
And here's a person.
a person?
Yeah.
Yeah. So having the right standard of judgment, and a church really can't function and be a healthy church without having judgment, discernment, and
Mhm.
judgment. It's part of being in a church community. There are many verses. So the end of James ends like this: "My brothers, if anyone among you wanders from the truth, and someone brings him back, let him know that whoever brings back a sinner from his wandering will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins." And so the question then obviously is, how can you do that if you're not making any judgment?
Right.
The judgment is man's standard,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think a lot of the problem is so many people have grown up in a Christian culture where this wasn't applied. So churches may have done what the Pharisees have done. Let's take one, which maybe doesn't impact our culture so much, but maybe our parents' culture more than ours. Let's take drinking and smoking and apply this standard. In our parents' generation, drinking at all, which is not forbidden in God's law, right? Or smoking tobacco, not forbidden in God's law. They may kick you out of the church for that. So
There was a clause in the original. I don't know if it was the church covenant. I think it was the church bylaws at Northwest when I got here that said that members could not drink alcohol or work anywhere where alcohol was sold.
yeah,
And I talked to the deacons. I was like, we gotta get rid of this. I mean, if you just obey the law, the letter of this, like you're telling people they can't work at Walmart,
yeah, or a gas station.
our gas station, can't work at Chili's.
Yeah, yeah,
we
right.
we got to strike this thing.
All places that they would go shop at or
Mhm.
go eat at,
Right.
even after church.
Yeah.
So that's that kind of hypocrisy that the world has observed, I think, over the past multiple generations. And now, of course, they are weaponize it to justify all kinds of crazy things like, what do they call them? Wolftherians, the people that think they're animals and stuff. And they're like, judge not, I'm a wolf. Right? Who are you to judge me? I'm only judged by the code of the pack.
Little sidebar. Did you see the? I think it was here in Oklahoma. The Oklahoma senator that said that furries,
Yes.
they if they identified as an animal in
Yeah.
school, that they had to be picked up by their parents, and if their parents didn't come, then animal control would be called.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. It's a pretty good legislative troll.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they're coming in interrupting the classroom,
Right.
like not talking, making animal noises. Like it's full blown insanity. So
Mhm.
yeah, but I think that's kind of how kind of we arrived here. But to be a church and to function as a church, you are expected to, if someone in your church has fallen into sin, you have to have a way first off to identify that, because that's bad for them, that's harmful for them,
Mhm.
and then have a standard by which you approach that person. You can't do what James says to do here if it's just judge not.
Mhm.
Right? There's none of that. I think Galatians as well, right? The end of Galatians has something similar.
Yeah.
Brothers, this is chapter 6. If anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. Again, not possible if it's just judge not.
Mhm.
Of course, church discipline, Matthew 18, the whole goal there. And maybe if you flip there, you can read it for us. But the whole context is, somebody's in sin in the church, and the goal is to restore them. That's always the goal. Like, the goal isn't to find somebody, judge them, expel them. It's to bring them back.
Yeah. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault. That implies judging.
Mm-hmm.
Between him and you alone. If he listens to you, you've gained your brother. If he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector.
Right.
We see the same thing in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. It even talks about judging in that passage. He says that it's been reported there's sexual immorality among you, and of the kind that's not even tolerated among the pagans, for a man has his father's wife, and you're arrogant. So there's a man who is marrying or sleeping with his probably his stepmom, and the Corinthian church is arrogant. Probably because, hey, we're not judging. We're super spiritual here.
Oh, did you see that? It's kind of I guess a troll, but it was I don't know, that's too strong of a word. It was kind of a living parable because of what happened with Alistair Begg and saying you should go to the wedding. And so someone tweeted, they're like, yeah, kind of like in the church, whenever you got a guy in your church who's sleeping with his mom, stepmother, and they decide to get married in the church, you should not only should you go along with that, you should bring a present.
Right.
And it's this scenario he's bringing up from Corinthians.
Right. Yeah. American Family Radio dropped Alistair Begg's radio program.
Yeah.
Because they gave him a chance to respond, and he doubled down apparently, and so they dropped him.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Keep following that. Keep following that story. It's I'm interested to see where it goes. But he says your boasting is not good. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Put a little yeast into the dough, and like you don't have to have a lot. You just have a little, and it affects the whole loaf, right? Cleanse out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, as you really are unleavened. For Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sanctified, or sacrificed. Sorry, Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. So cleanse out, like judge in the church. Like don't just let someone commit sexual immorality here in the church. Let us therefore celebrate the festival, not with the old leaven, the leaven of malice and evil, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. I wrote to you in my letter not to associate with sexually immoral people, not at all meaning the sexually immoral of this world or the greedy and swindlers or idolaters, since then you would need to go out of the world. So he's not writing about like monasticism.
Right.
But now I'm writing to you not to associate with anyone who bears the name of brother if he is guilty of sexual immorality or greed or is an idolater, reviler, drunkard, or swindler, not even to eat with such a one. For what have I to do with judging outsiders? So he is not saying go around just bashing unbelievers on the head.
Right.
But he says, is it not those inside the church whom you are to judge? God judges those outside. Purge the evil person from among you.
Mm-hmm.
So that there has to be a judgment within the church to keep the church pure.
Yeah.
There has to be a standard by which sin is evaluated.
Right.
And it's not the church's opinion. It's got to go back to the standard of the scriptures.
Right.
And as the church is upholding the standards of the scriptures, they're going to have to judge between what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought this one up, because I think people will also then capitalize on that if they're not Christians, and they'll say, "Look, your text says to not judge those outside. What have I to do with judging outsiders? Is it not those inside the church we are to judge? God judges those outside." So, how do we work through that? So I think the same way we would go about judging those inside the church and the standards of which we would call them to repent would be very specific, right? When it comes to those outside, he tells us that, of course, he's not telling us not to associate with those outside of the church who are engaged in all kinds of different forms of immorality or doing things contrary to God's word. The idea is that you'd have to go outside of the world. You'd have to leave the world to get away from that. But you don't come to, and this goes back to what Jesus says in Matthew, I believe. When you are engaging with a person who is not a Christian, their main issue is not that they're engaged in some individual type of sin, right? Like, that's not their main issue. Like, maybe they're living in sexual immorality. That's not their main issue. Maybe they're drunk. Well, that's not their main issue. Maybe they're a terrible father, right? That's not the main issue. The main issue is they are dead in their trespasses and sins, and they are not reconciled to God. So what do they need more than they need you to come and point out their individual sins? They need to know that it's not those individual things. Those are a manifestation of a deeper reality that's within them, that they have a heart disposition that's at enmity with God. So to the non-believer, we come with the gospel. The truth of the gospel always does come, I believe, with the law first, then the gospel.
Yeah.
That seems to be Christ's pattern. That's the pattern of the apostles. There's a standard of God's law. No one holds it. No one is righteous, no, not one. The wages of sin is death. So we come with the gospel. Now, if we do come with the gospel and the reaction is vitriol, which it often is, I think then we can apply the rest of what Jesus says here. Don't give to dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls before pigs, lest they trample you underfoot and turn to attack you. That's what he says, right, coming right off of that statement on judgment. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the standards we apply. Christians should have they should be friends with everyone, friendly with everyone, and that means people who live a drastically different lifestyle than you. But the way to win that person is not to point out these individual sins, or else they're going to do this judgment thing. Be like, what are you doing? Like, judging? Don't judge, because these aren't the issue. The issue is a heart that is rebellious against God, which will manifest itself in a whole variety of ways. So what they need more than anything else is to hear the truth of the gospel.
Yeah.
But there may come a time,
which is going to come across as judgmental to people that
Sure.
are in rebellion against God.
Yeah, I don't see how it can.
I mean, we're going to keep going back to Alistair Begg,
right?
the grandmother who doesn't go to her grandson's transgender wedding, even if she doesn't say anything, if she just doesn't go,
right?
They know it's because she's a Christian.
Sure.
And it's going to come across as...
Look, it does.
It's going to come across as judgmental.
Right. So, I mean, like, say your kid's in college, right? and let's say he or she is friendly with everyone. Maybe they're on a sports team, whatever. But then if certain people on the team have a party where at the party people are doing, say they're getting drunk, doing drugs, people are having sex, like it's a college party, and you just don't go, and you never go, you never participate. What is often then perceived by the person who does those things freely and enjoys them is that you're a judgmental you're judging me. You're a judgmental person without ever saying a word, right? It's just going to happen. And that's part of, I think, people that aren't believers, they know, whether you ever tell them or not, because God has written his moral law is written on the human conscience. And people will suppress that truth in unrighteousness, and they'll adopt all kinds of mechanisms to protect their conscience. And one of those things that they do to protect their conscience, which is convicting them, is to take that out on you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I live this way, but you don't, and you've never even said anything to me about it, but because you won't participate in these things with me, you are judging me. You think you're better than me. And that's just because I think it's part of that suppression.
Right.
To suppress the truth.
Yeah.
So
yeah. We need to make sure that we keep the standard as the scriptures.
Yeah, as you read in John, judge with right judgment.
Mm.
There's one standard of God's judgment that we are to go by. We aren't free to add to it. Like, I think alcohol is the perfect one. Though in our generation, that's kind of fallen away. But that used to be like a church discipline kicked out of the church sin, which it's not in the Bible, right? But somehow it was. So we aren't free to add to the scriptures, or to take away, obviously. Right.
So keep the standard as the scriptures. Make sure that we're not just expressing our opinion. That it's always going back to, well, that's because that's what the Bible is teaching.
Mm-hmm.
But we also need to make sure that we're not hypocrites.
Yes,
we need to make sure that we're not, because people will notice.
Yeah,
especially unbelievers.
Yeah,
like they'll notice if we're calling them out for something, and then we're turning around and we're doing something that's just like them. They'll notice.
Yeah,
it'll be very obvious. And Paul talks about that in Romans chapter 2,
mm-hmm.
right? He starts off by showing how the Gentiles are in rebellion against God in chapter 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then in chapter 2, he says he goes after the Jews.
Yeah.
Because
they're doing the same things.
You can hear the Jews cheering him on.
Right.
Go after those dogs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they're sinners. And he says, but if you call yourself a Jew and rely on the law and boast in God and know his will and approve what is excellent because you are instructed from the law, and if you are sure that you yourself are a guide to the blind, a light to those who are in darkness, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of children, having in the law the embodiment of knowledge and truth, you then who teach others, do you not teach yourself? While you preach against stealing, do you steal? You who say that one must not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who abhor idols, do you rob temples? You who boast in the law, dishonor God by breaking the law. For as it is written, the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you.
Yeah, and I think that just what he says there, the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles. I mean, we don't have that dynamic here, but we could say the word of God is blasphemed among non-believers because of you.
Yeah.
And I think that the world has seen a lot of hypocrisy in the church, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that scandal, for a while, first it was the Roman Catholics, and then the SBC had their big scandal.
Yeah.
And so
scandals.
Scandals. And I think, the world sees that, and the world says, this gospel you preach, it's nothing because you do the same stuff as the world does.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so we need to be careful. I think that's where I think there can be a ring of truth to Christians being judgmental because they can get away from the clear teaching of Scripture, and it can become opinion. But I think there's also a ring of truth to it because we so often are guilty of the same things that we
Right.
call the world out
Right.
on. That doesn't mean that we're sinless. It does mean that we are repenting
Mm-hmm.
and we're following Christ.
Yeah.
And the world needs to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, yeah.
Yeah. Good. All right.
Well.
There's the first episode of Most Abused Passages. All right, Giorgio, you want to take us home?
We don't.
But it's your turn.
You haven't
Okay, I'll do it.
It's
All
my
right.
it's my turn. It's
It's
my
your-
turn. I intro and outro
Oh, did
on
you?
Text Driven Tuesdays.
You did. It is my turn.
And you're trying to pass it off. Is that anxiety?
I
Do you have
guess it
anxiety
is.
over
Camera anxiety?
Do you have anxiety over
There's a
doing
camera
that?
here.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for joining us today for Free for All Friday. Hope this has been a blessing. Hope you learned something, or maybe you kind of was a refresher to you. If this has been helpful, pass that along to a friend. You can subscribe, and you could share it. Another thing you can do is you can download our app. So we have a new church app, Christ Fellowship Church. So you can type that in the Google Play Store or the Apple Play Store. It should come right up, Christ Fellowship Church Lawton. You can grab that on our website as well, cfclawton.org. Free to download. All the sermons are there. All the podcasts are there. It's a great tool. We're really grateful to have it. You can also, if you are inclined, you can make donations on there. You can designate them to the church, or you can make them out to the podcast itself, and we can use that to upgrade. We're in need of a few things, so go ahead and check that out. So thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next week for Text Driven Tuesday. Bye-bye.